The men and women who take their oaths seriously to protect and serve this country and commit to it for decades are literally being criminalized now. Their oath to the Constitution and to the people comes before blind obedience to any government or any president.
He's about to make a promise. And his promise is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And the core promise is that he is willing to risk his life and his limbs for an idea that's deeply embedded in the Constitution. That free men and women like us can govern ourselves, and that's what we all promise to do. Raise your right hand, repeat after me.
Welcome back to another episode of Political Newbie. I am Noah Clark, and this is a space for newbies to politics, and I thank you so much for joining me. I typically drop an episode weekly, but sometimes drop a bonus when I need to get something off my chest with haste, so here I am. And what's tugging at me is I think we all need to take a moment, just a moment, to recognize the humanity in our fellow Americans who wear the uniforms and the guns and who are terrorizing us on command daily, and we ought to take that moment because we're not Zionists. We're not cannibalistic savages that turn on our own. We have the capacity to, yes, as was the case during COVID, because we're humans, but we're not psychopaths. At least the majority of us aren't. Meaning, unlike psychopaths, if we make a mistake, like betray each other as we did during COVID, we have the capacity to course correct, to reflect, to reevaluate our choices and do better, which is a very strong distinction from a Zionist who is most likely clinically psychopathic or has some mental condition that hasn't been coined yet. Although I suspect a biblical term is required to diagnose the levels of evil that humans or certain humans are capable of elevating to. But in general, the majority of us aren't like them. They exist in a minority. Most of us have the capacity to stop, think, recalibrate, and remember that the people we are screaming at every day because they are marching through our neighborhoods with guns and uniforms are scared too. Most of them, at least. They are certainly psychopaths in their ranks that they are probably intimidated by, including the psychopathy of the current administration. And I'll read an excerpt from an article about what some of our bravest peers in arms are trying to communicate to us. And it's not coming through loud enough, and we need to amplify that. Headline: Trump loves ICE. Its workforce has never been so miserable. I suspect that's why he loves it. The journalist here is Nick Miroff, and he says, I recently spoke with a dozen current or former ICE agents and officers about morale at the agency since Trump took office. Most spoke in the condition of anonymity for fear of losing their job or being subjected to a polygraph exam. Okay. They described varying levels of dissatisfaction but weren't looking to complain or expecting sympathy. Certainly not at a time when many Americans have been disturbed by video clips of masked and hooded officers seizing immigrants who were not engaged in any obvious criminal behavior. The frustration isn't yet producing mass resignations or major internal protests, but the officers and agents described a workforce on edge, vilified by broad swaths of the public, and bullied by Trump officials demanding more and more. This was back in July. And I think that this message is being stifled. I think that all across the country, our peers in arms need to understand that people are speaking up within their ranks, that people are brave enough to speak up so that they don't have to feel alone. This is really heartbreaking because they have families to feed and protect just like the rest of us. And I cannot even begin to imagine what the retribution would be if they resigned or requested time off. Even though most of us think that that's what we would do if we were in their shoes. What is resonating from that article is that they are experiencing internal conflict as they realize that they are being exploited by the enemy to further destabilize their own cities and communities. Here is a message from one of the bravest among them who actually resigned in protest. A government attorney resigned over what he called a shift in ICE's mission from safeguarding the nation to chasing deportation numbers. Adam Boyd, a 33-year-old attorney, yay millennials, quit the ICE legal department last month, according to The Atlantic. Boyd told the outlet, "We still need good attorneys at ICE. There are drug traffickers and national security threats and human rights violators in our country who need to be dealt with. But we are now focusing on numbers over all else." ICE received expanded powers to conduct raids in sensitive locations such as churches, schools, and courthouses. There has been a growing number of arrests at courthouses in recent months, as the Trump administration ramps up pressure on ICE to increase arrests and deportations. The agency is deploying a new strategy that places apprehended migrants into expedited deportation proceedings, a process that allows for faster removal without the need for traditional court hearings. Now, I don't know if past administrations have done this before, but if they did, this is criminal. Stephen Miller, who is the White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem set a daily arrest quota for 3,000, piling up pressure on ICE agents to deliver historically high figures. Boyd said he ultimately felt that he had to make a moral decision to leave after watching the agency's priorities change under mounting political pressure. Boyd says, "It became a contest of how many deportations could be reported to the White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller by December of this year." According to Boyd, ICE lawyers were increasingly frustrated as legitimate cases were dismissed so that officer teams could arrest immigrants in courthouse hallways and push them through fast-track deportations, tactics that he says padded statistics at the expense of due process, aka authoritarianism. Now, no one wants our country to be flooded by illegal immigrants, right? We want people to go through the legal process to enter our country like everybody else. But we also know that the people fleeing regions that our occupied government destroys are not the ones leaving our borders open. Our criminal government is. They intentionally open the borders and allow fleeing immigrants to come in to serve their agenda, which is to dilute our voting power, create tension and division, and to scapegoat them whenever necessary. You know, it's like the Biden administration sets the ball and the Trump administration spikes it. And then they put on this laughable D-rated Hollywood performance where they pretend to attack each other in order to trigger us into petty disputes amongst ourselves. But the bravest of our fellow citizens who wear the uniform are speaking up, some even opting to resign. And I'm really, really disappointed that our influencers and independent journalists aren't platforming them and amplifying their voices so that we can show our support in return and stand in solidarity with them. And for the ones who aren't speaking up just yet, I am sure they are feeling the effects of being governed by an enemy that preys on our fears to summon the worst in us, and if we're already deranged, they nurture it. I mean, listen to this officer pretty much admit that his actions are politically motivated.
Well, you guys are ruining this country. You know that, right? Liberals already ruined it.
There we go.
Yep, you heard that right. He said liberals already ruined it. Obviously, at this point, we understand that the elites are using our law enforcement as their personal bodyguards to execute and enforce their political agendas. But I'm pretty sure that that's not what they signed up for. And the men and women who actually take their jobs seriously have to work side by side by their Zionist-infected peers who are going off the beaten path and taking out their political frustrations on civilians. And when I say Zionist infection, let me reiterate.
Eddie Gallagher is somebody who was turned in by his own teammates who are far from bleeding heart liberals. These are active duty Navy SEALs fighting in Mosul and Iraq who see their chief murdering people right and left, men, women, children, unarmed people. He was caught on video about to stab that teenage ISIS fighter in the neck. His teammates wanted him gone, the Navy SEAL command wanted him gone, but Trump saw an opportunity to make guys like Eddie Gallagher part of his personal political brand. He also pardoned people like Matthew Goldstein, who was the Green Beret officer who admitted to committing murder on live television. Other people that Trump has made part of his retinue, some of the craziest people in the special operations community. You know, there are people in this community who do go by a sense of ethics and who are not so criminally inclined, and the more Trump is in office and doing things like this, the fewer you have of those people, and the more you have of the sort of piratical types like Eddie Gallagher staying in and rising higher in the ranks. And you see that in the kind of fallout of the domestic crime that I describe in my book.
I included this clip in my episode yesterday and re-emphasizing it here because one of our peers in uniform, a U.S. soldier, is being labeled a national security threat for refusing to kneel to a foreign state.
So after 20 years of service in the military, yesterday I got pulled into an officer's office and counseled for posts that I have on my social media. During the counseling, they told me I'm under investigation as a threat to national security. When I asked for proof, like what the posts were yesterday, they refused to give it to me. They made me come back today to further go over stuff. They gave me the proof, and the proof they gave me are anti-Israel posts. Now, when I joined the military, I took an allegiance to support the United States of America. I did not ever take an allegiance to support Israel, but yet I am deemed a threat to national security because I do not support Israel and their genocide against the Palestinian people. Yes, you heard that right. I am deemed a threat to national security because I don't support Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people. Since when does not supporting a foreign nation get a U.S. soldier investigated for being a threat to national security?
The men and women who take their oaths seriously to protect and serve this country and commit to it for decades are literally being criminalized now. Their oath to the Constitution and to the people comes before blind obedience to any government or any president. They are also imbued with the responsibility of identifying the enemy, foreign or domestic, and protecting us against it.
He's about to make a promise, and his promise is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And the core promise is that he is willing to risk his life and his limbs for an idea that's deeply embedded in the Constitution. And I would argue that that idea is that free men and women like us can govern ourselves, and that's what we all promise to do. Raise your right hand, repeat after me.
I state your name. Do solemnly swear. To support and defend. The Constitution of the United States. Against all enemies. Foreign and domestic. And to bear true faith. And allegiance to the same.
We are not pawns for Donald Trump's agenda. Why now? It's because the military was called upon innocent protesters. We, in our oath to serve, we serve the people of the United States. The Constitution, these constitutional rights are being stripped and just denied, and the military will not be pawns to that. So I'm calling upon the conscience of military members who served previously and now. We have a conscience, we have mind, and we have a duty and moral obligation to say no and resist evil.
And I want to say that we as civilians have the same responsibility to be brave by speaking up, by supporting them, by standing in solidarity with them. We all know that our peers in uniforms are not a threat to our country or their fellow soldiers. They are a threat to the profit engine the elites are running that are arrogantly expecting that man, that soldier, and his fellow soldiers to subjugate themselves and their families to the whims of the elites. And listen to Zionist Mark Levin tell his audience that there is an enemy worse than anything on the battlefield invading our country.
Donald Trump knows Americans are warriors too. We don't look for war. We never do. But if it finds us, we don't cower. Well, you know what? We have an enemy within. It's more complicated than a military battlefield. They've seeped into our culture. They've seeped into our schools. They've seeped into our media. They've seeped into the Democrat Party. They're seeping into a piece of the Republican Party. They've seeped into our courts. It's much more daunting to figure out how to deal with this. But it all starts by recognizing it and confronting it wherever you see it and speaking out.
Well, if you didn't know what insanity looks like, you just watched it right there. He sounds like we're talking about the same enemy. And this is how they confuse you, right? By using the same language that we use. And I don't think that he's doing that on purpose. I think he really feels that he is America and we are the enemies. Anyone who does not obey their every command and look the other way when they rape our children and poison our families with chemicals and porn, in his version of America. But just in case you're being open-minded and you're listening to both sides, here's how you know who the real enemy is, because his side and our side are speaking the same language. So here's how you stay focused. If anyone tries to convince you that your priorities should be securing someone else's home when yours is collapsing on top of you, that's when you know for sure who the enemy is. And then you can draw that line. Imagine the pathological arrogance you have to tell a soldier who committed 20 years of his life to defending this country that if he doesn't pledge an unconditional allegiance to a foreign state, his entire service and sacrifice is forfeit. That's exactly what they did when they started invading Palestinian territories in the early 1900s up until 1948. You understand? They are just repeating history. They had the same kinds of speeches, declaring that they were the masters of the region. And anyone who denied that, anyone who resisted that, were enemies, and their reaction to those enemies was ethnic cleansing and genocide. So yes, they are that arrogant that they expect us to submit while they ratchet up their cloud seeding weather manipulating operations in our neighborhoods during the day, spray pesticide poisons into our air by night, and have RFK announce that while he's defunding mRNA program, he'll be introducing a universal mRNA in its stead.
Over the past few weeks, BARDA reviewed 22 mRNA vaccine development investments and began canceling them. Let me explain why. Most of these shots are for flu or COVID, but as the pandemic showed us, mRNA vaccines don't perform well against viruses that infect the upper respiratory tract. Here's the problem. mRNA only codes for a small part of the viral proteins, usually a single antigen. One mutation, and the vaccine becomes ineffective.
We're developing a universal vaccine at NIH, which is a vaccine that addresses the entire phylum of viruses. And so it's a vaccine that mimics natural immunity.
I mean, how stupid do you have to think that we really are to say that you're going to remove funding for mRNA vaccines, but then create a universal mRNA vaccine? Like, what the But obviously, that was so above the pale arrogant that RFK had to scrub the post. He had to delete it. He had to take it back. They actually managed to convince RFK that this is how you approach the public. You're in the game now. Treat them like they're stupid. They'll blindly follow along after throwing a brief tantrum, and it'll just work itself out. This is why you cannot trust a Zionist, okay? Even as noble and heroic as RFK seemed, I mean, he was the one that pilled me back in August. He is a Zionist, and so his values and morals are forever compromised. I didn't know that then, but I know that now. He will always be a Zionist before he's anything else. And just to remind you that there is no gray area in being a Zionist, because we should all be reminding each other from time to time, the rogue terrorist haven for pedophiles, State of Israel, militarily occupying Palestine, does not, I repeat, does not have a right to defend itself, and the militarily occupied Palestinians have a right, I repeat, have a right to resist.
2 years into this genocide, Israel has a right to defend itself, when we know that from the standpoint of international law, an occupying power does not, in point of fact, have a right to defend itself against the people that it occupies. A right to defend yourself is for a state where Palestine has no recognition as a state. It's recognized as an occupation, and the occupied people have a right to resist their occupation up to and including arms. They have a mandate of care for people under occupation. They do not have a right to defend themselves against them. And that is what is supposed to dismantle occupation. But Bernie can't say that. AOC Pelosi can't say that. And the reason is that the Democrat Party is wholly owned by AIPAC just as much as the Republicans are.
Which everybody should know by now. We're not going to be throwing around these dumb words like liberal and conservatives. They're all on the same fucking team, okay? And we're all on the same team, okay? We're Americans, that's it. We're the American party. We're the anti-Zionist American party. That's it. But it does make you wonder why all of Israel's allies are rushing to recognize Palestine as a state. I wonder if it has anything to do with the history that they're preparing to fake. To say that a Palestinian state and an Israeli state got into a fight and had a war and Israel won. Maybe that's what this is about. Because we should not be trusting any move or any declaration that these traitor governments make apart from full arms embargo and direct military intervention to halt these colonial projects. And here's the hard, cold reality. As an occupied nation, we have the right to resist too. To my peers in arms, resignation is resistance. Can we all start reaching out to people with platforms to find out who these brave officers are so that we could set up a GoFundMe or something so that we can demonstrate that we value their commitment, we value their service. And even though there is tension between law enforcement and the community, I think we need to realize that that tension is manufactured. Because obviously, yes, we have many issues in our country. We have a crime problem, a drug problem, an illegal immigration problem, a pedophile problem, a porn addiction problem, a gambling problem, a housing crisis problem, a health crisis, an education crisis, a moral crisis. The list goes on. But the snakes manufacturing these problems because their survival depends on it are asking you to add to the list of problems by militarizing our streets and dragging our country into authoritarianism. And again, just to put this into perspective, Donald Trump has allowed this disgusting foreign scumbag pedophile Tom Alexandrovich to fly to comfort and safety in Israel so that he can continue to censor the speech of Americans.
Tom Alexandrovich is with the National Cyber Unit. He is the head of the Technological Defense Department.
The state prosecution received almost 30. I think it handled 26,000 and received about 40,000 inquiries starting from the 7th of October regarding inciting content, about content that leads to demoralization, about some malicious content. This is huge data. 90% of this data is all under the Meta group, which includes Instagram, Facebook, and so on. There are organized campaigns on this issue. We saw a lot of posts. A lot of posts that the prosecution removed. Several hundred posts of content associated with
It is an initiative that came from Iran.
It is not only about such enemies. We are also talking about activists or other anti-Israeli activities that are organizing against Israel. I also encourage people to report to us so that others can benefit.
While Donald Trump has literally abandoned an actual American in an Israeli prison for 6 months without word. Zatea reports a U.S. teenager has been locked in an Israeli prison with no trial for 6 months. Where's the outrage? The family of 16-year-old Mohammed Zahir Ibrahim, who was taken by Israeli soldiers in the middle of the night, says they feel abandoned by the Trump administration. And this was a report that came out on August 23rd. And we know that he's innocent. Israel does not have a justice or a legal system, so we don't have to debate the details of why this kid was arrested. Not only did Pam Bondi not make any mention of this foreign pedophile, Alexandrovich, who was in our country suppressing our First Amendment right, Zionist FBI agent Kash Patel posted a comical tweet yesterday, which had to be flagged by community notes. He posts, "No one is above the law. FBI agents on mission." And the post got flagged, saying Israeli government official Tom Artyom Alexandrovich was arrested and charged in joint FBI local police raid for luring or attempting to lure a child online to engage in sexual conduct. He was granted bail and allowed to flee to Israel, avoiding charges. Well, guess what? X, as we I guess already know, is officially occupied territory because the note was deleted. So now you can see FBI Kash Patel's post. It's up sans community note. They are shamelessly telling us all that we are the enemies, that we are their enemies, and we are the criminals. And they're coming after us. Even our soldiers and officers who put their lives on the line for this country are enemies to our government if they don't agree that Tom Alexandrovich and other Jewish pedophiles are allowed to rape our children with impunity. I'm sorry, but we're not Israel. We're America. Our families and friends that wear the uniform need to remind our occupied government who we are and resist it. At the very least, demand a full investigation into Epstein before you're asked to treat your fellow citizens like they're criminals. I wanted to keep this short, so I am going to head out. But what I am going to do from today until something happens is I'm going to chase down all of the influencers and all of the independent journalists and encourage them to praise our fellow citizens who resign and protest. And if they choose to identify themselves, maybe encourage them to set up a GoFundMe or something so that we can say thank you and show solidarity, because honestly, we contribute to people who do less. Also, before I go, I realized that I did not acknowledge all the new subscribers that I gained recently. It's always really nice to know that we're not alone, that we understand each other, and that we connect with each other. And I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate that. I do love reading your comments, so thank you for leaving your thoughts, your teachings, and your encouragement. Even those of you who stop by to tell me that my learning sources are garbage impart wisdom while they do it. So thank you for taking the time to share. And if I don't see you in my comments, leave me a thumbs up to let me know that you were here, and I cannot wait to see you in my next episode.